we go. We should be live. Let's see. Yes, we are live. We made it, Chub Love. Yeah. It's always more finicky to do it with your phone because you kind of have to like sync it up with your computer and just like tweak some things here and there, but we are live. We made it. Cool. So, welcome. This is gonna be one of my last streams in the mornings like this. So hopefully we get a super duper delicious cup, and I hope you enjoy. So today we're gonna still brew with our Manos Juntas beans. And what we're doing differently today is we are pouring slightly differently in the beginning. So instead of doing a 40-gram pour and then an 80-gram, we're kind of like flipping it around and we're doing a 80-gram pour and then a 40-gram pour. And according to the Tetsu Kasuya technique, this should highlight more of the acidity in the brew and get that out there. So let's see what happens, and let's explore. Let's do it for science. Don't worry, I'm still gonna do live streams though, but it's not gonna be so like consistent in the morning where I do my morning brew. It'll be more about longer live streams where I actually do like explorations and cuppings and kind of like test out some theories here and there that I have. So the next live stream that I'm actually gonna do is a cupping session. So I have these 3 bags over here that I totally want to do a cupping on, and I'm kind of excited to try all of them because they're all pretty different. We got some whoosh whoosh washed heirloom, and then we got a Arabica and Robusta blend, and then we got a Kenyan bean. So this is going to be a really interesting cupping sesh where a lot of the coffees are very different. And I'll probably like schedule it for like sometime next week. I don't know when, but I'll figure it out for my schedule. Okay, let's begin the brewing. We'll move you down to a brew cam like this. Nice. Move that around. And let's measure our beans. Yeah, it's not that easy to see when the sun is shining, so I'm actually gonna close the blinds a bit. Just so you can maybe see the numbers a bit better. Hopefully some numbers are visible. Nice. Measure out our 20 grams of coffee. And yet again, the recipe that we're going for is a 1:15 brewing ratio with a grind dose of 20 grams with a grind setting of 38. Our temperature of the water is 95 degrees Celsius. We'll be using 300 grams of water, and these 300 grams will be divided into 2 segments, a 40% segment, which is 120 grams of that 300, and a 60% segment, which is 180. So this segment over here controls sweetness and acidity, so we'll be pouring in these 2 doses, and this over here controls strength, which we'll be pouring in 3 segments of 60 grams. Yeah, I always do a bit extra just in case I need to just like toss some out over here. Sometimes when I grind 20.0 on the dot, it reaches like 19.8 or something. I'm like, damn it, toss in a few extra beans and then grind the extra 0.2 out. Just because I like nice round numbers. Look at that. Perfect. So I know that it's kind of like 0.3 grams in there doing its thing, but that's just how it works sometimes. Let's get a smack on the dot. So satisfying, so satisfying. Okay, let's get our boiling water and a cup to brew in. Grinder tax. Yeah, sometimes there's retention, sometimes the bean goes flying, sometimes you just eat one for science, you know? The grinder tax. So we got our cup, we got our brewer, we got our filter, like so. Let's preheat, and I'm gonna bring this a bit further and into the shot. Something like so. Yeah. Preheat. Tare. Toss in the grinds. Shake it out. Tare again. Bring it over to the timer. And we need to also cool down our water to 95 degrees Celsius. So we'll do that. Like so. 95 degrees Celsius. And let's begin. Start our timer, and we're going to pour the first dose, which is 80 grams, and then let it fully drain out. Like so. Oh, I'm loving this like light that's shining right over here. Looking so good. Fully drained out, then we'll add our 40-gram segment. And then a 60-gram segment. Another 60-gram segment. And then the final pour all the way up to 300. Like so. Okay, so the brew ended up at around 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Interesting, interesting. So from my just like visual understanding of what's happening right now, I actually think that the way that we're doing the first pours impact how long the brew time is, which then leads to more or less extraction, which then leads to more or less acidity. So, for example, right now, the brew time was pretty short, meaning it might be slightly under extracting the coffee, which then will highlight some more of those acidic notes slash sour notes that are just slightly on the under extracted range. So even though it's talking about sweetness and acidity in this range over here, I actually think it's just yet again back to the extraction basics. If you pour a big dose in the beginning, it seems like the time and the brew time is just a bit quicker, which leads to a under extracted cup, which then has more acidic slash sour notes. And then the other one where it's flipped around, it has more extraction, which is probably a balanced slash just more like less acidic notes in there. So like I don't think we can kind of say that it's like sweetness and acidity, but it's still just like extraction control in my opinion. That's at least what I am noticing here. But who knows, maybe I'll taste this and I'll be like, wow, this like blew me away. But I really do think that the way that the recipe, the Tetsu Kasuya 4-6 recipe talks about sweetness and acidity in the beginning is really just extraction again. Just like packaged a bit differently. Okay, here we got our cup. Looks delicious. Let's move you back up again. Like so. Cool, cool. Nice. Okay, so we got our cup of coffee. Smells like coffee. Tastes like coffee, and it does have a bit more of those acidic slash tart notes now. And what I am feeling in my mouth is that the backsides in my mouth are kind of like puckering a bit, and it's like slightly sharp in the backsides that I didn't have in my two other brews, yesterday and the day before, where I poured a bit differently in the beginning. So it's pretty delicious also. I think that this initial pour kind of like area where we're playing around with the doses of the pour is kind of like just more or less like agitation, or like the way that it like distributes and like moves around the grinds in the beginning, which then leads to more or less agitation, which probably leads to more or less extraction. So it's kind of like slightly correct the way that it's advertising it, but I would say if I would have to repackage it, I would say that the first segments in the Tetsu Kasuya 4-6 method controls extraction again, but just on a more micro level. So over here, you control strength, which is also extraction, but this one really impacts it a lot. While over here, you're just slightly moving the needle back and forth with the doses. Yeah, I 100% agree, David. I'm probably gonna do a video on this technique too, but I think a more fun video would be just looking at all of the different Hario V60 techniques that I've done and kind of like identifying different steps and what those steps do to extraction. I think that would be a really cool video, like really breaking down each recipe and being like, so this is why they're doing this over here. Oh, we're back again, I think. We are back. Is it like focused? Oh, tech issues. Yeah, I did see it. Thanks. It's a really rad t-shirt too. I love the gradients and it's kind of like front and back. I got it from a place in Toronto called New Van Gogh. They're sadly enough closed right now, as in closed down. But it's a really good and cool and like awesome t-shirt. Very artsy, yes, yes, very artsy. So just going back to this cup over here, if this over here is also just another way of controlling the extraction rate, I'm really curious as to like why it happens. Like why does a bigger pour in the beginning lead to less extraction compared to the opposite way? Like why is that the case in this recipe, and why is that something that works like that? Because at the end of the day, you're still pouring 120 grams, but you're just flipping around how much you pour at specific segments. So it's kind of interesting to really try to understand it, because I don't fully understand it, why it happens like that, but I kind of want to like learn it. I kind of want to maybe bust out some science tools and try to figure it out somehow. But for now, I'll just like use my best judgment to kind of like understand it in a different way. And the way that I think about it is back to extraction and back to agitation, and just how much is being agitated at specific times, and just what compounds are probably being extracted in those very specific segments. So yeah, it's very interesting. I need to learn more about the topic to explain it at a like scientific level, but at the end of the day, it is just controlling extraction, and it's extracting more or less depending on if you pour a big chunk in the beginning or a small chunk in the beginning. Yay, we are back for everyone, as in crisp, good quality. So what I am probably gonna do, that I mentioned earlier on in the stream, is to do a cupping session next week, because I have these 3 different bags that I want to do a cupping session with. So they're all pretty unique beans. We have a natural heirloom, and it's a Ethiopian whoosh whoosh. And we have a Arabica and Robusta blend that I tried on a espresso machine that tasted really good actually as a blend. And I really want to see how it tastes as a filtered coffee, which will also be why I'm cupping it. And then we got these Kenyan beans that I got to just add another variable in the cupping session to see how it fares against these two other ones. So I'm pretty excited to cut these next week sometime, and we'll see what's up. Obviously, so the Shablab says that I obviously have to become a hydrophysicist to learn these things. Who knows? The amount of like coffee knowledge that I've learned through just like research and learning about different methods and scientific like terms and stuff, I'm pretty much like 1/3 there, right? So Hassan says maybe it's a thing with the way it extracts, like how channeling an espresso tastes different than a well extracted coffee, but could have a similar extraction yield at the end. Perhaps. Like, thinking about it normally, like, what is changing here? Well, the bloom is changing, as in the amount of liquid that we're using for, I guess, the bloom segment is a bit different. So maybe those compounds that are being extracted at that time is a bit different. Maybe the way that water flows through dry grinds is a bit different from how it flows through wet grinds, and that way it kind of like extracts and saturates and kind of like removes different compounds due to that dry versus wet bean state. I feel like there's just so many small things that I can kind of think about that might be the reason for this change in extraction or taste. And it's just like, I don't even know where I would start to like really understand it, you know, like really understand it through a scientific means. But yeah, a lot of like weird experimentation will be had, hopefully. But at the end of the day, it's really just more or less extraction that is happening. And I think that that is the answer that most people want, and they don't really need to understand the science, but I want to learn the science. So I'll still be keeping it in the back of my head and trying to like figure out why it's the case that that change in taste and extraction and kind of like dose is really impactful. And I think it's really fascinating that it does happen like that, because it just shows that the smallest of tweaks in your brewing recipe, just moving things around a bit, have a huge impact on the final cup of coffee that you drink, which is crazy. Hassan also says, I would think there would be bed sorting like bad sorting, maybe? Bad sorting like fines rising and boulders falling. Perhaps. I've realized that whenever you pulse pour multiple times, there's always a lot of fines that easily settle down and clog the filter over time. So this is kind of like very evident with people who use Chemex brewers, where not only is the fines clogging up the filter, but also the sides of the brewer have like this really snug fit with the filter, making it so that sometimes the liquid gets to like a slow snail pace clog that doesn't even allow the liquid to go through after like 5, 6, 7 minutes. So I have a feeling that there's something like that also happening here with the way that we're pulse pouring and dosing out those segments. So it is something that is to think about. Bed as in coffee bed, yes. So let me read that sentence again. I would think there would be bed sorting like fines rising and boulders falling. Yeah, the coffee bed for sure is being impacted a bit differently with the doses. And talking about the fines rising and falling, I do think that that is the case, but not just because of the amount of liquid being poured in those doses, but just the doses themselves. So for example, using the James Hoffman technique, where it's a very quick continuous pour from after the bloom, versus something like the Tetsu Kasuya technique, where there's multiple pours being done. Before I did my burr upgrade, I could easily tell that the fines were clogging up the filter because I could see the brew times extending far beyond what I ideally wanted. And even at coarser settings, those fines were merging up to the top and really being prominent in my brew, which was also why I ended up getting this burr upgrade, because I realized through this technique that my grinder had a fines problem. Let's see. Like mud, but mechanic style brewer has a metal filter. So in that case, a lot of the sediments and grit actually goes through and into your final cup. So that's totally fine too. Just like how a French press works with the metal filter, I think that that grittiness is actually a positive quality with some beans, and like should be embraced sometimes. It's not always about clarity and the silkiest of drinks. Sometimes you want that like thicker, rich slash gritty texture to be there as a part of the brew. And you also get more oils, which is great too. Fats and oils. I'm gonna add a dash of water to this, see what happens. Like so. I liked it without the dash of water. It got a bit, so that slight acidity that was there totally dissipated, but now it got a bit on the boring side. Doesn't have that interesting acidity slash sourness to kind of like bring some highlights and kind of like allure and interest to the cup. And now it's just a bit more of a neutral cup of coffee that kind of needs an extra like sparkle here and there, you know? But still a pretty good cup of coffee. I would actually say that my favorite cup from today, yesterday, and the day before is actually the first cup that we did, where the dose in the beginning was 60 and 60. We did a balanced pour for both of them. And I don't really know what to say about that, but that's just personal preference. But what we did find out was that, yet again, the acidity slash extraction that is being changed over here is a thing. And the amount that you're pouring in the beginning with those segments are actually impacting extraction. So it's pretty fascinating. I think it's really cool that that is built in and baked into the understanding of the brewing recipe, and that you can even modify that variable when you're tweaking your recipe. So it's really cool that, and like why I'm saying this is that a lot of recipes don't even think about like the pour dose or the amount of pours. It's more about, yeah, if it fills up to a really high level, just take a break and then pour again. So the pulse pouring, for example, is just like a baked in safety measure that is supposed to prevent the liquid from flowing too high. But in this technique over here, it's actually a feature of the recipe that you can control and understand to then control extraction. So that's what I really love about the Tetsu Kasuya technique, that it actually takes that in mind, you know? It's just another interesting, really cool variable to control. And yeah, it's very fascinating. All these things are constantly. Okay, well, thanks for joining me for this final morning stream. We won't have any more of these specific brewing segments, but yet again, we will have more live streams down the road, and I'll make sure to schedule them a bit far in advance so that you can see it and make sure to hopefully join. I don't know if I'll be doing it on the weekends or weekdays, but we'll just see what kind of flows well, and I'll try to work it from there. I'm kind of excited to see what happens with my new job, with this whole change in my lifestyle, but I'm for sure gonna keep on creating good content for Brewing Habits YouTube channel and just like keep making stellar stuff. So I'll see you peeps whenever. I don't know when that is, but it'll be soon. Take care. Let me move you down and stop the stream. See ya.